January 24th, 2024, meeting of the Danville Architectural Heritage Board, regular scheduled meeting, I might add. I guess our first order is introduction of new members.
Yes, sir.
And I'll also point out, I believe, should I introduce our attorney? Maybe first, that's not on the agenda, but would you
Yes,
like?
sir.
Would you like to introduce?
I will let Henry do the introductions.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Henry Smith. I'm an attorney practicing out of Nicholasville. I've had the privilege of working with planning and zoning here, and now had the privilege of working with y'all a couple times. Glad to be here.
Very glad to have you, and for new members of the board, our legal representation, sometimes we've had it, sometimes we've not, and it is a welcome, very welcome to have counsel for, when we need it, it's very welcome. So thank you, I appreciate you being here. And welcome to you, glad you could join us, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right, introduction of new commissioners. We have,
I introduced last time, so.
yeah, so we only have one to introduce, right?
That's right, but
Yes.
Lynn, he's,
And if you'd like to you can just say your name and glad to be here, or you can just nod, or you can give us a little background.
how we drug you into this?
You got about an hour?
It might break the budget, but sure, no,
Do I need to speak into this?
yes.
If you will, poke it and it turns green, and you know it's on.
Not that one.
Oh, not that one, oh, no.
You're good. Well, first, let me say a couple thank yous. First, for Joni, submitting my name for consideration, and I hope I can measure up to her expectations, and I'm sure if I don't, she'll tell me. I'd also like to thank Joni for helping me through the application process, my computer impaired skills, and going back and forth with email and phone calls. I'd also like to thank the commissioners that approved my consideration, and a call out to Commissioner Cottle for telling us that Jonathan and my resume were impressive. And it was for me, because I didn't think I would write a job application at this time in my life. You know, most of my references have died, so, you know, it's just the way it is.
Makes
And
it tougher to substantiate when they're all dead.
It does, you know.
And I know that feeling.
I know, you got to put Bellevue Cemetery on the address, but I'm a newcomer to Danville. Moved here in 1995 after living 25 years in Alaska. And we just decided it was time to retire. And so we started searching places in the lower 48, discovered Kentucky, and thought that was the best choice because it was the furthest distance from relatives. And we were blessed to have designed and built our home in Anchorage, Alaska. It was sort of a combination of Walter Gropius Bauhaus rectangles and straight lines, Frank Lloyd Wright, excessive overhangs, deep shadow lines, Escherich opposing shed roofs. We got to Danville and looked at several properties, and an 1896 Queen Anne Victorian house on Lexington Avenue decided to own us. And my colleagues in Alaska asked, how could you go from modern to old? And I said, I've done modern, I want to try old. And so that's where I currently live, and again, I want to thank the board for giving me the opportunity. It's been a pleasure so far.
We'll try to keep it painless
There you
if
go.
we
Thank you.
can. Very good. Thank you and I think we've assembled a pretty, in my recollection, it seems like I've been on here a while. This is a very well credentialed board.
Yes, you have top-notch folks.
Yes, yes. So moving on to item number 4, Joni tells me it's that time of year when we look at officers.
Oh, we need to approve the minutes, sir.
I'm sorry, I did, I'm sorry, I missed number 3. Approval of the minutes from October the 18th, 23, not 24. The agenda's corrected. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes? So moved. Do I hear a second?
Second?
Hear a second? Any further discussion on the subject? By acclamation, all in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Very good. I'm sorry. Now, Joni, now to number 4. If you'd like to update us on the officers.
Yes, we have not done this for a while because we have not had a full board. And now that we have a full board, I feel it's time to move on and get this done. The last meeting, we asked for any nominations, and you had nominated Mr. Noble as co-chair, and that's the only ones I received. So I submit to you the board as presented in your agenda for your blessings and voting on.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we approve, I got a question to the city, to the attorney. Can we take these individually, or can we take them as a whole?
You can take them as a slate. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we accept Johnny's recommendation and Mr. Ty for chair, and Mr. Noel for co-chair, and Madam Dana Dixon for the secretary.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
I have a second. Any additional discussion?
Call for the question.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very well. The ayes have it.
Are we on the recording, or we're being recorded now?
Yes, we are.
Would one or both of you
Well,
like to?
I'll start, and then I will let my colleagues, we met this morning. We are moving to P and Z officially July 1. Is that,
July 1, it still has to go through the legislative body, but
we're shooting for July 1.
I can get up to the line.
Yeah, and I know that you all probably have a lot of questions, so we'll field whatever concerns, questions, comments you have.
Yep.
I forgot my hearing aid, so if you could speak up.
Yeah,
appreciate
I
it.
can speak up, I can do
Thank you
that.
kindly.
I will preface this by saying that Henry was actually the one that did most of the revisions as far as the zoning ordinance amendment. That's what Planning Commission heard this morning. So they make a recommendation, and then it will go to, we have to bring it to each of the legislative bodies because we are a joint Planning Commission. But obviously, you will still remain a city board, city appointed, those types of things. But I'll let Henry take it.
My main points to you all, based on what I was hearing before the meeting began, is that this move under planning and zoning does not anticipate any change in the way that you all do business. Everything that sets up the structure of how this board operates was taken from the city code of ordinances and put mostly whole cloth into the zoning ordinance. That puts it under the auspices of planning and zoning. That means that planning and zoning can recommend text amendments if we ever need to change anything about the way that you all do business, but there are no real substantive changes to what you're doing. There might be some change in the public-facing side of this, in that someone who owns a historic property in Danville will now go to the same office for both zoning and historical considerations. There'll be some applications that are streamlined and combined, and that should reduce confusion. But we've prepared this zoning ordinance text amendment, and I see no reason for concern about any change in the way that you all have been operating.
All right.
Yep, that was the goal.
I think it's amazing. It's only taken us 20 years to finally start getting it, a little bit right.
I mean, it took us about, what, 9 months? We've been talking about this for a while. We planned on trying to have it come through last fiscal year, and now we're looking at July 1 for FY25, so it takes a minute, but.
All right, Joni, would you like to add anything to?
It has been problematic in the past for folks who are trying to get signage on their building to come through this board and then go to planning and zoning, only to find out that their requirements are strict or there's an issue. So as we work through this, and hopefully if we are ready to do this on July 1st, Michaela and I will work together. We're going to try to streamline some of these signage applications to make sure that It'll probably go to planning and zoning first to have a look at, to make sure everything's good, and then come to us for recommendations and approvals. So I think all in all, it will make a little more accessible and certainly user-friendly, especially for signage. You know, you all well know that signage is a major issue, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But I think that just to help folks not have such a various agencies to go through, that this is probably a good move for us. I am delighted to have legal representation and folks that are willing to listen and work.
Good.
So I'm delighted.
Yep. Yeah, and we'll still have to go through the budget process and things like that. Joni kind of came up with some preliminary numbers as we were going through this in the fall, but I'll have to bring a preliminary budget forward probably in February to the Planning Commission. And so I'll let Joni get eyes on that. You all can get eyes on that.
Right, and if
But-
you guys look at the very last piece of paper that I gave you in your packet, it's my notes on the budget. It's very cursory notes. I kind of wanted to
saw
let you
that.
all know where we were at with that process, moving money around a little bit, but
Yeah.
I think this is, you know, pretty solid numbers, what we can look
Yeah.
at. And then, excuse it, it's pretty rough, it's just my desk notes, but I did want you all to have an idea of what we will be asking for the city. And the city will be funding this, make no mistake, this is funded by the city of Danville.
Yeah, that's correct. So right now, we have basically an interlocal agreement with the 4 jurisdictions with predetermined allocation funds for Perryville and Junction, and then we typically ask for the same funding amount from the city and the county. Because we're bringing this in and the city's going to have to allocate additional funds, it's going to be a part of our budget because you are under the Planning Commission umbrella, but we're going to kind of try and keep it separate because it's going to be a separate pool of money that's coming in for the DHB specifically, so that it's not being funded by the county and things like that. So,
All right,
Yes, sir.
thank you
great, thank
for
you.
updating us.
I got a question.
Question?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Tom.
My question is the same one that I've always been concerned about when this does happen. And it's a hypothetical, maybe. But once Joni gets over in planning and zoning, and there's an issue that comes before planning and zoning that has something to do with an issue inside the historic district. And you've got board members on planning and zoning who's going to be voting yes or no against that particular issue. That might not be close to their heart as much as it is that somebody lives in the city. Am I making myself clear? How are you going to handle that? So you've got.
I guess I'm not
let me
clear on what
take-
you're
Let me take
asking,
a
sorry.
step further. So you got
All right.
people that on the planning and zoning board that lives out in the county,
That's correct, yeah.
and that's okay. But they're not going to be as particular about some of the issues inside the historic district when it comes to voting. How are you going to handle that?
Actually, John, I think I can address your concern. As it is set right now, planning and zoning doesn't really interlope into the COA procedures at all. The only time that we go in front of planning and zoning is if we are going to make an amendment to our guidelines.
Actually, you only go through the city for
Now,
that.
that we'll be doing the city now.
Well,
In
yeah.
in the past, we did go through.
Yeah,
planning and
I think
zoning.
we changed it. I brought this concern forward
Mm-hmm.
because the way it was written was very vague, and I was like, I don't understand if planning commission has to make a simultaneous vote as city commission,
Yeah.
or if we just make a recommendation to the city. It just seems like it could lead to conflict if the two bodies
Okay.
have disagreements, and if we have to give final approval and the city has to give final approval, that's how it's written. That gives me concern that if one body approves it and the other doesn't, I don't
Right.
know what we do from there, but. the
Well,
only-
but I think John's concern, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you are concerned that there will not be adherence to the guidelines or our procedures. Is that correct?
Yes.
So our procedures and guidelines will not be affected at all,
No.
because the only time in the past that we have seen planning and zoning is if we're going to do like a standalone landmark, or we're going to move our design guidelines around or something of that nature. Other than that, we have not really had to deal with planning and zoning.
But people, the members of planning and zoning can vote on those guidelines, right?
No.
No, sir.
No, sir.
You just answered my question.
No, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, the only time you all would come through, it's similar, we went through that historic overlay district recommendation, I believe, last year sometime. So you all would make a recommendation. This is for a zoning change. So this is if you want to bring something into the historic overlay district. Planning Commission has to hold that hearing, make a
Right.
recommendation, but City Commission gets final say. All appeals will still go to City Commission. We're not trying to change that procedure. You all are going to be under us, but it's kind of like Board of Adjustment functions as its own separate board. It doesn't, it doesn't respond or fall under the actual Planning Commission that's appointed. You all are just going to be a separate board under us.
Thank you.
And you all need to also keep in mind that anything like that has to start with you. It has to start with this board, because the recommendations come out of this board. Now, I'm not saying that the city commission could not say suddenly we want to redo the guidelines, but I think that would be problematic. Generally, all of that has to come from you all to go through the process. You have to make those recommendations to the city commission.
So where does this, if I may, where does this leave us if the city commission disagrees with us? Are they,
Oh, they can still overturn you,
they can still overrule us?
absolutely.
That process is as it was before. Yes, sir.
Then where's it go? Should not it be in circuit court instead of?
Well,
with the
we're going to
city?
talk about that. So we're going to talk about that a little bit here in a minute when we talk about what happened with the copper and oak. But that would alleviate some issues. But that might be tricky, John, to get done, so. Otherwise, I'm really pleased, guys. I feel like we're in good, solid footing. It's not going to mess with anything we do. It's not going to decrease your ability to rule on the historic district at all.
Yep, that's correct. We really weren't trying to change the procedures with this. It's really just a transitional move to bring you under P&Z. We weren't trying to change any procedures, how you all operate, anything like that. So, if that's something that needs to be looked at in the future, we can. But for right now, this is just all we're trying to do, so.
Did I hear another question?
Similar to John's process question, this might be a future discussion. When you were saying something goes to planning and zoning, in terms of streamlining, does that mean a person or owner in the historic district would send their application to planning and zoning, and then they would send it to us? Or they still send us the application first, and then we send it to?
Well, in every other thing but signage, it's going to come to us first.
Okay, but on signage?
On signage, we're going to have a dual application where they actually are probably going to look at it first to make sure that that it is not out of accordance with their specifications of what we want. There's a little difference between the ARB signage and the city planning and zoning signage.
Yeah.
One of the big differences is a window graphic. Like if you have a very large plate window, our design guidelines say that you can't take up any more than 25% of that window for a graphic. I don't necessarily think that that's addressed in planning and zoning. There's a facade limit there for about 5% in the historic district.
But that's for wall signs.
Right, so there's some differences there, but that is the only one that I think that will end up going to them first, just to check, to make sure that everything is copacetic. Because we've had a couple cases where we've approved a sign and then they've taken it to planning and zoning and it's not up to snuff for planning and zoning, so they have to start the process all over again. So it just makes it easier if planning and zoning looks at it, since they are generally the more restrictive, and then we can say yay or nay after that.
And it's confusing for applicants because
It
they
is.
think that they got final approval, say it goes through that whole appeal process with city, and they think the sign's approved, but truly they have to get a sign permit through us too. So we're just trying to make it a joint application.
Right.
We wouldn't be able to issue the sign permit until the COA is issued. So it won't change as far as you all will ultimately need to make that approval, but it just makes it so we've already got the application. Once you all approve it, we're able to approve it. And
Right.
Outside of,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that outside of signs, planning and zoning doesn't wade into questions of building design. So that'd be the only place of intersection.
Correct.
Good, thank you.
And I would say to for our newer members, if it is a conforming sign, it does not generally have to go through the hearing process. I can generally administratively approve that within about 10 days. We did that a few years ago, because if it's a conforming sign, there's no sense of bringing it to this board. It just slows everything down. The only time that you guys generally see is if there's a question or if it's non-conforming. And then those tend to be all kinds of fun. So, and that's putting it mildly, so that's when you'll see that most of the time.
Well, I think any effort to streamline the process and make it easier for the owners is
Yes.
a positive.
Absolutely. I fully agree.
And historically, we've been a very user-friendly board,
Yes,
that within legal notification time, if someone has a project in town, we'll really start this project tomorrow, or as soon as possible. We will usually try to convene the board and
Sure.
get them on the road.
yeah, the very last thing we want to do is leave the public with a bad taste in their mouth. We want to make this as easy as process, because sometimes we have to tell people no. And that's never pleasant, but the more that we can make our interaction with them as user-friendly and positive as possible, it just makes everything better. So I feel like we're doing a good thing here.
Yep.
Good questions.
Michaela's a hard boss, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Anything else, members? Public? Michaela, thank you, man.
Yeah, thank you. I'll stick around for the rest of the.
Sure.
Okay.
We'll keep you up to date as this moves forward, but we're hoping July 1st it becomes a done deal.
Very good. Joni, you want to bring us up on item number 6?
Whoa, this was a good one. I want to thank Mr. Noble and Mayor Bowen for going to that as well and sitting through that with me, which was not pleasant. As you well know, the city commission overturned the ruling. And there were some questions that some of our commissioners specifically asked me to put this on so we could have some discussion. And that's another reason I've asked Henry to join us today. I did not have a good feeling leaving that meeting. It was very stressful, I will tell you. And we've got some issues there. So I know that you all have questions, so just start and we'll do the best we can answering them. I know Gary wanted to.
Okay, well, I'll start.
Go ahead. I got the email. Can we put this on? Yes, sir.
And my apologies for being out of town, or I would have been there.
Yeah, Tom, sure.
The city attorney made a statement that kind of set me back a little bit. He referred to our ordinance as aspirational, as opposed to a guideline or design requirements, that it was just sort of wishing and a hoping and lollipops. So would you like to comment on that?
Well, turn my mic on. I actually asked Henry if he would review the meeting, which he did do. And I asked him to specifically look at that, and I will let him address what he told me, because he's much better at that than I am.
I'll tell you, that jumped out at me, the discussion of aspirational standards. And going through the design guidelines after hearing that, I think there is support in the guidelines for that kind of description. And I'll tell you why. There are statements like on page 5, which talk about what the guidelines should do and should not do. And one thing it says is the guidelines are not there to dictate a specific outcome. That kind of thing renders them more discretionary rather than a standard where you say, wrong size window, wrong material, strike, you're out. It's more left to the professional expertise of this body. So in that sense, they are not as much of a, uncrossable line. It's for you to weigh in a discretionary manner. Now, I think if discussion of them being aspirational is taken to its furthest extreme, it can kind of nullify what this body does and can leave ground to overturn just about anything. So I think while the standards themselves say they're not supposed to dictate a certain outcome, I think anyone involved in this process should be careful not to use this aspirational idea as a means to overturn anything that you all do.
All right, so let me just kind of dig into that a little bit, because let's approach it purely from our perspective here and in reviewing an application. Should we be reviewing it relative to the ordinance as a guideline, or should we be reviewing it based on our professional opinion of what's best?
The authorizing ordinances for this body, I think the language is the board shall use the guidelines.
Okay.
So they're kind of like a tool in your arsenal in addition to your professional experience.
Okay, okay. And so then let me turn the table, and an applicant comes to us, perhaps a restaurant applicant comes to us, and is he given, do you feel that he's given enough criteria to be able to have an expectation of what is going to be approved?
Yes, I do. I feel like they know. I feel like they. This thing. When we get a applicant that comes to us, I just talked to a fella that's going to have a church down on 120 North 3rd Street. His question to me was, what's okay to put down there? So the first thing, I ask a series of questions. Are you going to have an internally lit sign? How are you going to attach it to the building, et cetera, et cetera? In his case, he just wants a window graphic and a pendant sign, which generally ends the conversation. I say, okay, you fill out this, get it to me, in about 10 days, I'll get your COA. Now, had he said, I want to put this big backlit sign, I want to do this, I stop them very quickly and say, I will tell you right now that those are not generally approved by the Architectural Heritage Board. Let me point you to the guidelines of what is approvable, what are the recommendations within the district, and what signs are approved for the district. I turn them to that. Now, Gary, as you know, they will either accept that or not. But I really feel that we do give them an ample amount of information. And I have on many circumstances went to business owners and worked with them to get their signage into compliance. I've had several. And some of that is just they simply did not know. And so we've worked on it. Then you get other business owners who want it their way or no way. And that's kind of what we're running into with a couple of businesses here.
So from now, I'll go from your perspective.
Yes, sir.
You feel that the guidelines gives you enough ammunition to be able to tell them how to do it the
Yes.
right way?
Yes, sir, I do. And I will say 9 times out of 10, we can get this worked out before before you guys ever see it. Most of it is just some time and effort explaining to folks why those guidelines are there, what we're trying to do within the city to make the ambiance what people would want to see in a historic city, to spend their money. And also, you often point out to folks, and Dana's pointed out to folks many times who have been in here, sometimes the designs that they come up with, they love, but if you put them up on the top of the building, nobody sees them. And so you say, well, you're really wasting a great deal of money for advertising that nobody's going to see if you're walking down the street. And then you see that light bulb come on. Oh, okay, because they really haven't thought of that. They think the bigger the sign, the more splashy the sign, the better business it gets. But as in the case of Copper and Oak, you can't see that sign unless you're turning off 3rd Street onto Main. So I don't know, is that a better use of their advertising? I don't know. But for me, it's very easy for me to say, that's not an appropriate sign, let's think about this. I feel like I have plenty ammunition, Gary, but sometimes people just, they don't
Yeah,
want to listen. They don't
I
want to listen to
understand.
you.
And I think in my just some background, in my tenure, I think we've had 3 challenges, I think, total. And the last 2 of those were from the same individual.
Correct.
Who just, I won't say anymore.
There is a pattern there,
There's a
yes.
pattern.
Seems to be. So, but I feel like we have some really strong guidelines for our signage. But you just get folks that, they don't care. You know, they want what they want, and that's just the way it is. We've got another one coming down here on the Hub building that you're all gonna be seeing, pretty soon, I suspect. But one of the problems with the Hub building is there's a facade easement through the Heritage Council, so it may not get to you for this internally backlit sign, so I'm not sure. But we're gonna talk a little bit more about some grant planning for some sign issues. So I don't feel good about what happened the other day. I just feel like part of the problem is I don't feel like you all were well represented. And that's another thing that I talked to Henry about. I don't feel that you all have the appropriate representation when you go into a hearing with the city. The city needs to give you a reason why it shoots down or denies the CO or denies your all's ruling, and I don't feel that's being carried out very well. And so I would like for us to be able to have representation in these hearings, which I've also talked to Henry about.
Okay. That was the other missing link.
Yes,
Where we were not given, we as a board, through you, were not given an opportunity to even voice our position and why.
no.
I would say that on a previous question that went before the commissioners, and as secretary, I was asked to give them all this background information that clearly stated our positions. And then I went to the meeting, and it was pretty obvious that they were just flipping through the pages when they sat down just a few minutes before the meeting. So we were not represented even though we provided all the information.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the biggest issue I have with that process, is that you just, and I've been through 3 of these now with you all, and we have never had someone to present this board's side of it. And I understand that they get all the information, but I still think there should be some representation for this board within that arena.
Well, with this revision to planning and zoning, does that open the door for a different approach to public hearings?
That I'm not sure of. I don't think that there's any way that we do things differently just because we're with planning and zoning. But this may need to be a procedural thing that we discuss with the city, with our attorney,
Okay.
talking to the city attorney to figure out how that procedure works. It's not well-defined, and maybe it is time to define that a little more. Because it is my understanding that if our ruling is overturned, that there has to be a reason that the city overturns that. I have yet to see that come out of these hearings, and that's where my issue is.
On these questions of justifications for overturning and whether or not this board is represented, your authorizing ordinances didn't have any guidelines for how appeals to the city commission take place. There's plenty of guidelines for how the initial COA hearing takes place, but nothing really defines what happens at the next level. And maybe that's something that could be fleshed out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, it's pretty vague.
Yeah, okay, well, that's all very helpful. I'm perhaps bullheaded, but, you know, I'd rather not think that we review projects on the basis of the owner's aspirations. Take them into consideration, of
Certainly.
course, but somehow aspirational, that term puts the ball in the owner's court rather than the community's court.
Agreed. And that is the one thing that as we make this transition, there's some things that we need to address, but that hearing procedure is absolutely one of them.
Okay.
That thing was a mess. I don't know how better to say it, but it was a mess.
Mr. Bowling?
You know, I'm sitting here listening to this.
I got a lot of elbows from John during the meeting.
I'm sitting here listening to this. We're talking to the wrong people. We're talking to ourselves. I would like for this board to direct our attorney to orchestrate a letter to the mayor and each commissioner individually, not as a group, stating our position and why they overturned our decision at the last meeting, and take that a step further. They even denied our director's input. They wouldn't even listen to her. So what was their rationale? What was the reason they did what they did? And why was the process all with the city attorneys and not the mayor or the commissioners? I don't know how to articulate and structure that meeting, that language. You're an attorney, that's what you get paid for. So that would be my wish as this
Yes.
board up here, that we send a message back to the city commission. Why did you do this? On what basis did you do this? And then take that a step further. Any legal jargon you could put in there, just put in there, so.
And maybe that's a good starting
Am I the only one
point.
feels this way up here?
No, I'm completely in
And maybe
agreement
that
with
is a good starting point to start the
We just
conversation
need some clarification, if nothing
about how
else.
the hearing process needs to work. And maybe that's a good first step, because it is extremely vague.
And being on the other side of the fence once upon a time, if you send it to the mayor or one individual, it gets watered down. So it needs to go to each member of the commission, in my opinion.
Not being an expert in Robert's Rules of Order, but should that be in the form of a motion?
And let me take a step. And I'd like to CC a copy of that to the city manager and to the city attorney. Is that appropriate, Mr. Attorney?
I think it would be expected, yes. I think it would be appropriate. I'm hearing this request and thinking about how to put it into words. I am a little concerned about how it might be received and just what kind of response it might
Well, that's their
elicit.
problem. That's not our problem.
Yes, sir.
Fires.
I'm gonna make a personal comment here in light of our getting, three denials and having all three of them overturned. One of them was clearly politics, not any better description for it. For myself, I've come to the understanding that the only reason I'm on this board is not for my knowledge or background or integrity or any other reason other than the state requires so many people on the board in order for the city to be eligible for grants. So I've decided that's the only reason I'm here.
Well, I think you're more important than that.
Maybe in your opinion.
Well, I think what we're all hearing is there's a whole lot of frustration here, not just from the board, but everyone. And we need to start the discussion about how to fix this hearing process. It is clearly not working well. When I leave a commission meeting and I've got two very upset commissioners on both sides of me, and one of them's elbowing me pretty good the whole time, and I leave out of there very frustrated because I'm unable to articulate what my board's wishes were or why they decided what they decided, or even that the individual who had done this violation did not bother to show up and clearly violated it and knew what he did. There's a problem there.
So all that verbiage you just said is going to be in the letter, right?
We'll work on it, and I will get it to you all. And I don't want to, John, I don't want to.
No, you can do it diplomatically.
Certainly. I don't want
It doesn't
to-
have to be confrontational.
We clearly are at a point here where the hearing process needs to work better for everyone.
Needs some
And I have to say, it presents legal challenges if it's not fleshed out very well. Someone could want to overturn a ruling that we did based on what the city commission has overturned. It could turn into a mess. So this hearing process, and I did not want to throw this in on top of this move, but as we move and work through this transition, this hearing process is one thing that has to get worked out. absolutely has to get worked out. So I'm in full agreement with you with that.
Can they read the motion? Can they read the motion?
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman, can I make a comment?
You certainly may.
Poke the button.
I'm going to reinforce what John's talking about and Joni. I watched the video when this board was discussing the copper note sign. It was tough, and I could see the anguish going back and forth. In my simplistic viewpoint, it was a content versus process difficulty that one, a sign was put up outside of the guidelines. That needed some discussion, but also the sign was put up before an application was made. That's the process question. And I saw that going back and forth between the members of the board. Apologies if I didn't get that right. I attended the commissioner meeting, and I saw the same thing. I saw them trying to struggle. Now, I don't understand politics or anything, but I think it was genuine. Several questions came up. Well, are we voting on the process, or are we voting on the final result? And it was Stephen Dexler who says, you're voting only on the final result. Even though this mess with the application is there, that's your only way to vote. I was very much concerned when Joni stood up and wanted to make some comments. And the city attorney just shut her down and said, we're not talking about guidelines.
I was shocked.
And I said, oh, okay, now I'm the newcomer, you know, are there procedural things here? But I would say, well, at least there had to be some discussion about why we came to this. And then finally, I think either the city engineer or one of the commissioners were saying, well, copper note needs to be admonished. Is that a legal term? What, and is it our responsibility to admonish them, and what form does that take? I mean, do you go down the street and hang signs and stuff, or does the city engineer or the city commission admonish?
Oh, well,
And then,
within our ordinance, there are prescribed fines for not doing the COA. And I will tell, and Tom well knows that I wrangled around with code and ordinance and the city police chief and the city manager and the city attorney for about 2 months over this copper and oak issue. Asking for fines, asking for letters of censure, asking for all of that. And it finally took Michaela writing a letter to Copper and Oak saying that they were not in compliance with the signage ordinance to actually get it here in front of you all to hear. So there just wasn't a lot of support for what I thought was a clear violation.
Yeah.
again,
And to answer you, is my understanding, in the city ultimately had the hammer for not making an application to the tune of revoking the liquor license.
yes, Stephen brought that up, I remember that.
That's a big hammer.
Yes,
I can understand why the city didn't want to pull that trigger.
Right.
That would have been egregious, I think, but still, there are
But
ramifications.
when, and I'm not sure if that's a legal term, but what I would consider a willful violation or ignoring
I
our
felt like it
ordinances,
was, yes.
then there's an issue there. So
Yes.
We need the methods to address that.
And, you know, it has been a continuous thing with those two businesses, a continuous thing. There are signs hanging in their window right now, you know, and there's a Vespa bolted to their building that they didn't get permission to do. So that leaves us in a bad situation. So I don't know. I know that the start has to be that we've got to address the issues with the hearing process. That has got to be the number one start here, because this is going to come up repeatedly. And I don't want to see this board struggle, and I agree, the city commission was struggling. You had a lot going on there, and I did not feel there was very clear guidance on how to deal with it. So this is something that we've got to address as we move forward, or you're right, this aspirational business can nullify everything. And that's a problem.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know how you would articulate this, but I think the letter needs to convey the fact that in that situation, it seems like the legal counsel, set the tone for what they could consider in that situation. But that is so one-sided, they're totally forgetting that our role here is to represent all the business owners in maintaining a certain ambiance of history that is used by tourism and brings in money, and it's a whole broader question that was totally ignored. So if you can stick that in there somewhere.
Yes, ma'am.
Good point.
There you go.
Yes, sir. No.
I agree with John, and I agree separate letters need to go out. However, we had one commissioner that voted to deny the appeal.
Yes, Ms. Peak?
Ms. Peak, that's right. And I think that letter needs to reflect in a more positive way than the letter that goes to the other commissioners. And because after the vote was taken, I was saying, my God, there's somebody up there that's supporting us. We need to encourage her however way we can. Start with education, bring her more on board. Because again, she was struggling, given what the city attorney was saying. You can either do it this way or you can't do it that way. And I would think a letter to her for
Okay.
thanking.
Well, I think the whole tone of that meeting that, how can I say this? Well, I'll just say it. That whoever was running the meeting was not in control. The city attorney was running the meeting, and that should have never been.
I don't think we got a good shake. I'll say that.
Certainly.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make the point that with this transition occurring, you all sending a letter to the city, they would basically be reflecting upon and looking at amending their city codes, because they're the ones that currently have that regulation in place. But that doesn't do us much good right now with them basically, effective July 1, they're going to be removing all the city code references to DHB. So it might be something that we want to look at when the transition becomes effective. It might be something that we want to look at as part of this transition and language in the zoning ordinance. But I don't know if sending that letter to get city code amendments currently for the regulations is going to get us anywhere. It needs to be in the zoning ordinance. We probably need to look at some findings or things like that we clearly state as part of the appeal process, kind of like what we do for variances, conditional use permits, things like that. But I just wanted to make that point that ultimately it's going to end up in the zoning ordinance. So that's really, you need to be talking to me to bring it to the city to come up with those findings. So I just wanted to let you know.
I can't imagine they would act that fast. Would we be appropriate to at least express our concern, displeasure, whatever, and then reference, in future
Yeah, yep. Yeah, and that's fine too.
adjustments, this
Yep.
needs to be addressed? Would that be?
Yep.
They're not gonna move that fast anyway, John.
Well, you don't know. I mean, that's, sometimes, not sometimes, elected officials need to know what in the world is going on and on the mind of the people they appoint on these committees. I mean, they have to. If they don't, then they're, this is probably the wrong terminology, they're just gonna run roughshod over all of us. And that should never be. I just know, I've been on the other side of the fence and I know how the game's played, so.
Well, let me ask you this. If a letter is sent and addressing the concerns that the board has now,
Yep.
and then making reference that we want to work towards fleshing out the hearing process with your office.
Yep.
Would that suffice? Because I don't want to upset everybody while we're getting in the middle of this thing either, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
That concerns me greatly. But I also think that there needs to be some indication from this board back to the city commission that they will not.
But it's not a
please.
matter of upsetting people, it's a matter of getting,
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you.
that's, the upsetting people is not the issue.
Right. No, we've got upset people. We've already got upset people. That's clearly. So I guess I don't want to jump too heavy, John, I guess
Well-
is my,
I'm like Gary and Lynn, I was really disappointed that they didn't give you the time of day. One person didn't give you the time of day, I'm gonna rephrase that, so.
well, and I don't take that personally, but it does concern me that the hearing process is not allowing this board to have a solid reason why things are overturned. That has not happened. You know, they just basically vote, yes, we vote to overturn it, but there's no reason given. And that absolutely needs to be done. So there's clearly issues here. And I don't think this board expressing that there's an issue should upset too awful. I think they probably already know that there's an issue.
I would think somewhere, and maybe not so, but the reason for this board is, and kind of as Dana touched on, but is to qualify the city to make sure we follow certain rules on the state, national level, to maintain our status, et cetera. That some of those governing bodies would come back to the city and say, are you just overturning these things willy-nilly?
Well, there will come, that will
There
come.
should be a day of reckoning from some.
And, you know, we have to turn in reports. We're getting ready to turn in a report to the Heritage Council right now that details all these issues. Now, the copper and oak thing will not go on till next year's report because it ends at the end of September. But yes, there's going to be questions eventually of why. And let me explain to you all. You can be an architectural review board without having the city CLG certification through the state. You can still form and function as an architectural review board. This certified local government is just a layer on top of that, which is a working partnership with the state through the Kentucky Heritage Council and National Park Service. There are a lot of communities within Kentucky that has a functioning ARB board without having that CLG extra layer on top of it. But it comes down to the Kentucky Heritage Council is going to know why that was going to be overturned and what reason it was overturned. And at this particular point, I can't give them one. And that's going to get into the report from next year, because they're gonna ask me, why was that overturned? And I'm going to have to say, well, it was the city attorney's recommendation, and that's what they followed. There was no real reason given. There should have been concrete reason as we find this, that it is appropriate on this facade, that it does not damage the building, et cetera, but that was not said. And I was gonna try to make that point too, but I didn't get a chance to say that.
So what I hear you saying, that it's okay for the state to ask that question, but we shouldn't necessarily ask that question.
No,
we
no,
can
that's not
ask
what
it.
I'm saying at
No,
all.
we can ask it.
You can certainly ask it.
So that question will be in the letter, is that what I?
If that's what you're if that's
that was
what the
part of
board
my motion,
directs.
Unless somebody votes otherwise.
No. Your motion, I think, is perfectly stated. Now stated.
Except that it hasn't been.
I'll leave it at
Lovely.
the discretion of our
It has not been
attorney to
stated, 'cause I
legally
haven't
present
written
that
it down.
motion. At his-
Dana wants a motion.
I need, it was never stated.
I think it was, he made the motion to direct our attorney to write a letter,
Well,
as he sees fit.
Well, and
that-
then let me add to that motion that the staff, Joni, and the city, and Mr. Smith, write the letter jointly. And I'd like to see a copy of it before you send it to
Absolutely.
the city commission, wouldn't you all?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. I'm quite fine with that, gentlemen.
Okay.
Okay, so
I'm
that
gonna put it
motion-
on there,
That's
John
fine.
Boland says.
Well,
Mr. Smith, are
I've
you
been called
comfortable
worse
with
than that
that?
before, so.
Is that,
prepare,
are you comfortable with that?
you want
Yes,
to
sir.
prepare a
Okay.
letter to
Always wanna make sure the letter
commissioners,
prepared.
individual commissioners. That states kind of, sort of what?
They have to articulate it. That's why they make the money, we don't make the money.
They're gonna send a nice letter. Okay. I'll figure out what.
I
you
would
meant.
say articulating our concerns over the hearing
Okay.
process.
Unless the chairman
Articulating, that's
votes
good.
for a
Thank you.
raise, I don't know.
No, not yet.
Are you
That's
comfortable
later.
with your motion?
Do what? Oh, I'm
Are
sorry.
you comfortable with your motion that it's a letter to articulate our concerns about the review process?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for
All
doing
right,
what you're
so
doing.
we have a motion.
I'll second the motion.
All right. We've had a lot of discussion, but any further discussion before we vote?
Just a separate letter.
To miss me, right. And just for, I've already kind of said.
So that was a friendly
I
amendment.
would,
Friendly
Yeah.
amendment.
Peace offering.
and as a discussion on the friendly amendment, I think I, maybe along with other people, did reach out to Miss
I think you vote on
Pete.
the amendment
Ms.
first.
Peak and comment my appreciation. Anyway, we have a motion, we have a second, we have a friendly amendment. I think I can ask for a total vote on this, I believe. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Motion carries. Thank you, folks.
The next is just literally the sign for the catered dog. I approved it administratively some months ago, and for some reason, it slipped through the slipstream and didn't make it onto your May or June agenda, so I'm bringing it to you
I knew you did that. I
today.
thought, okay.
It's
You
been
say
some-
we didn't approve it. All
Yeah,
right.
that's what Tiffany tells me. We did not hear it, so, and I can't find it on any of my agendas. So I administratively approved the catered dog. It met all the specifications, and it's got they've got good hot dogs too, so we'll go down and, that was the only COA hearing or administrative approval that I've done. I've got several for the next one. We'll save that for all the fun in February.
I got a question. Since we're at 326 West Main Street,
Yes, sir.
did you also approve the eyeglass place?
I did not.
And where the little
Did
glasses
not
are
approve
hanging out
that.
over the?
No, I did not. I just seen that the other day. I was like, so I've got to talk to Code and Ordinance about that.
Okay.
That was not approved. There was no application there at all. So they're on my list.
Okay.
You know, and the amazing part of that for our new members, since we're just making comment, most of our sign painters in this community know the rules.
Yes, they do.
But they will print you a sign and paint you a sign and hang it up.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just do it.
Yeah. But no, they did not, and they're on my list. I've actually sent
Okay.
Ian an email over that, so.
Okay.
I know Michaela's getting tired of hearing from me with all the, so-and-so didn't get a sign permit, so.
My prophecy is as downtown, particularly with the new streetscape develops more and more and more, we're gonna see a lot more activity.
Great.
And that's
What we
good.
want, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, let's move to item number 8, grant planning.
Well, we have a sign issue, as you know. Habitually, this is the thing that plagues all architectural review boards across the United States is signage. It has been, I want to say 10 years since you all did your design review guidelines. I think 2012, somewhere in there, I believe. So I think now has come the time that we apply for a grant to redo the sign guidelines for downtown. You have a great turnover in city commissioners. You have had a turnover in mayors. You've had a turnover in city managers. And I've had repeated questions from the city manager of who came up with these guidelines for signs? Was it a consultant that did this? Well, no, there were numerous public hearings that the folks of this community expressed what they wanted the signage in their downtown to look like. I think that has probably
And the city
come.
commission, if I remember, that individual was city engineer when we.
The
did all of this.
5 city commissioners back in the late 90s, middle 90s, set the guidelines. Some
Well,
of us didn't know
you,
what we were doing, quite frankly, so.
well, in 2012, they got a sizable grant, John, and they
That's right.
redid all those guidelines.
right.
And So my question here is, and I've got a meeting with the Kentucky Heritage Council, is how sticky is this going to get with the signage guidelines? Is it a matter of local taste for backlit signs, which seem to be the big point of contention here? The big balloon, plastic-backed signs like Papa John's has got, which started this whole mess, as you recall. Is that something that the National Park Service is going to kick over? Or are they specifically looking at how do you attach that to the building? Does that damage the architecture? Does it obstruct the architecture? I mean, what is their guidelines there? And I've got to have some more conversation with the Heritage Council to kind of flesh that out. If it is down to a CLG to say that you can't attach it to the building because of this is damaging to the building, you don't want to drill through the blocks or the brick, or if it's going to hurt some architectural feature of the building, is that where we come down on? Or are we going to have public hearings through this grant process, which I would recommend that we do, and let the elected officials and the city manager hear from the people of this community what they want reflected in the signage of their downtown? I think we've gotten to that point. There seems to be a disconnect there between the city government and what the people wanted. Clearly, in 2012, they did not want those signs downtown because they made a point to put it in the design guidelines. And I think we're at that point now where we probably need to readdress some of those issues and find out what folks want. If they don't care about big plastic backlit signs and it's not going to damage the building and the Heritage Council doesn't care about that, how they're attached to the building, then so be it. I don't want to get in a quagmire over signs when all of the local downtowns are under such siege from people who are coming in and flipping these buildings and putting the cheapest possible stuff in these buildings that they can and then moving on. It is absolutely an epidemic in this state. All of our local downtowns are suffering from it. All of the local communities are suffering from all of this mass flipping that is going on, and I'm seeing it everywhere. You can come in and have someone purchase one of these buildings, put the cheapest possible stuff in the building, sell it, and then they're gone. And then your community is left with a building that is structurally been compromised or that does not reflect what Danville needs to look like or what the community here wants to. I don't want to lose the ability to make things that really matter happen as opposed to a backlit sign. So we've got to figure out what is our strong point here? Where do we stand?
At the end of the day, our duty is to protect these buildings.
Correct,
Bottom
correct.
line.
Bottom line. And so I don't want to see a backlit plastic sign, get you guys off the rail of doing your duties.
Right.
So to me, I don't see a harm if that's what the people of the community want. If that's okay with the people of the community, then we need to express that and develop our guidelines to go along with that. I don't want to have a set of guidelines that keep getting overturned because it lessens your all's ability to step in and weigh in on stuff that counts.
On the critical stuff, yes.
I had one of the one of the planning and zoning commissioners asked me a question this morning. Well, can't we make some law to say if you buy a building here, you've got to stay here and own it because it's such a plague that's happening in all these communities, all of this flipping that's going on. And it's a real problem. In as much as we want the community to thrive and we want new business and we want new things in our downtown, we don't want a guy from, I don't know, northern Idaho coming in here, buying the building for cheap,
say
fixing it up as cheap as possible and selling it and moving on. I won't say California. But you understand, I don't want to see your all's ability to deal with the big questions sidelined by a plastic sign. So I think now's come the time, especially since we're having all these issues, it's constant signage. It's the constant issue.
That's been, I'll say 90%, in actuality, it's probably been 98%.
Of the problem.
Everything that's come before us since I've been on the board.
That's contentious, absolutely.
It's signage.
So we can do the signage without redoing all of the guidelines.
Windows.
Of course, windows. But I don't want to do it with this grant process. I want to wait until we're moved over into planning and zoning and then start that process for the upcoming year. But to do that, I want to start getting some prices together, because we're looking at probably $10 to $12,000 price tag
Okay.
to get that done. So if that is appropriate, I will start making those plans to get that grant in the pipeline. And also, I will report back with you all after my meeting with the Heritage Council about where they're at, where they're coming down on this signage issue. Because it's not just us, it's everywhere with these
How do
signs.
you choose, who will get the project to rewrite these guidelines? Because I remember there was a whole signage plan that was done, I think it was, through tourism, that, was a comprehensive plan, and it was here to be approved. I don't know why it went away, but I was so glad that it died, because it was awful. So, do we have any input?
Oh,
about
yes.
the quality of the?
Well, because I
review the
will,
guidelines?
I will have to go through the federal bid process for this, because it is a federal grant. With the feds? Well, generally, if it's a certain amount of money, the federal requirements for the grant, say if it's over $10,000, I think they make you have 3 different
Yeah. Do you have to have
people.
like an RFP request for?
Yeah, there
proposal or
is,
something
and,
like
and that changes regularly, so I've got to get the bid package and look at it again. I don't know.
You're talking about the state threshold for bid, yeah.
Well, and this is, right.
It
What are
is
y'all
exempted
talking about?
for,
We can't
From the
hear
We
that.
can't hear, we can't hear anything you all are saying.
Well, and this too, understand, this is a federal grant that is administered by the state, so the federal regulations may be different than the state regulations. I don't know. I know that there's a litmus there that we have to go through.
right, that's the layer I don't know. What Michaela was pointing out was that state statutes on bidding exempt professional services, and they have a $30,000 threshold for when you have to start. Is it 35 now?
Right, and once I get all the bid package, it will tell me exactly the steps I need to take, but we will get more than one. And we will certainly want to get someone that is qualified through historic preservation. I've already talked to CRA, which did your last set of guidelines. Unfortunately, their folks have left them, so they were unable to talk with me about this. It is perfectly okay, Dana, if I kind of pre-interview the folks that we're going to send a bid package to.
I would just hope that we would get to see examples of the work of those people who are competing. Because I've experienced this myself, and if you don't get to compare what you're truly comparing, the one that's the cheapest is using, shall I say, tricks to appear to be lower.
I understand.
And we could really get stuck with something bad.
Well, and to alleviate some of that, what I will do, and what I've already done, is the Kentucky Heritage Council maintains a list of folks that are qualified. Because we're not really looking to redo the signage of the whole town. We're looking to specifically deal with signages on historic buildings. So they have to have expertise within that realm of things. And I intend to send the bid package out to 5 or 6 of them, and I'll bring you guys back samples and what their stuff is. I'm disappointed that CRA couldn't do it, because they clearly,
good.
they were great, and they already know this place and know everybody here, but their folks have left, so. But I think it's come time. I do not like opening that bag of snakes, because it is unpleasant, especially because it's signage, and everybody's gonna complain about something with it. But we're past, we've got to deal with it. We just absolutely have to.
I think I'm lost, but do we need a motion? I think
No,
we
no,
need a-
no, sir,
we
you don't
a
need,
motion
no,
for
I'm
you to
I'm just
proceed?
bringing that to you to let you know that's kind of my track.
Then
um,
proceed on.
Okay, very well. Now, when we go to spend money, we'll need some motions.
Okay, okay.
And the last thing, we have got to set our goals for the year. And I've prepared a few of them, suggested 2024 goals. You all can look there. I am happy to take additions to this. Opinions, is there something else you all would like to see as a goal for the upcoming year? I can certainly leave out, move around, add to.
Like those commissioners that read it at the last meeting.
Well, we kind of got messed around a little bit last week because the weather was so awful, so I kind of got stuck in it.
Could we piggyback on the city's information that they, as I understand, going to start sending out monthly monthly information through the potential water bills, and could we piggyback on whatever they send out?
I don't know, I can certainly ask. And what do we mean they're going to send out information? I don't
Well,
know.
it's my understanding that the city wants to send out a information sheet on what's going on in the city.
Okay.
On a monthly basis.
Are they going to send that out via the mail with the water bill?
I think it's an
I
enclosure.
don't know how it's going to go out.
Okay,
I don't know how it's going to go out, or I was just told that that's what they're considering. Yeah.
well, I think we can.
So if they do, then I think we need to piggyback on.
Yeah, let me check on that. I mean, we can certainly do a little, who are we, what
Yeah,
we do,
yeah.
here's what you need to do. I can certainly do that. And I would suspect that would go with provide property and business owners with information on DAHB. But let me check, let me find out how that process works, John, and I'll certainly ask about it because I think that'd be a worthwhile thing
Okay.
to do, especially folks downtown here.
It may be appropriate for us to have our own webpage on the city's website.
We do.
They didn't really, well, it's pretty perfunctory though.
Well, if you, I mean, it's not pretty. It's usable. The city's changed its website again, but if you go in there and you type in Architectural Review Board or DAHB, it pops up our page and it has all the forms and everything that we need.
Forms aren't sexy.
They're not sexy, no, they're not sexy.
I mean, I just think it would be an opportunity to.
Are you
tell-
volunteering to create some graphics,
Oh, at
Dana?
my regular rate.
At my regular rate. Well, one of the things that, going along with what you're talking about, and some of the future plans that I would think would be great on the website, is we have one of the best databases in the state as far as our historic resources. We really do. We've got more of them actually in an electronic format than anyone else that I'm aware of outside the Heritage Council for our county. I would think at some point, I would really like to see all of that available on our website as well. So if you're
Could we do
looking.
a link? Not
Yeah.
simply do a link from our website? to
Well,
that?
the information is just in its raw form. I mean, I've got it on my computer.
Oh, okay.
So we would literally have to load that up into the city's computer, and then would be a searchable database within our page. So if you wanted to look at 120 North Third Street, there's a historic resource form for that building, and you could look it up. You could find if it was on the National Register, when it was built, things of that nature are all contained on these forms. And I've got them all in electronic format, and Bridget and I were kind of working that around, and then when she left, and I hadn't really slammed Michaela with it yet, because she's probably already sick of seeing me, so I
If
think there are
made
some,
that a suggested goal for the year of somehow
It
getting
can't-
that
it-
into a usable database?
it certainly can be.
Because I can see people who are coming to town to or an existing owner going, ooh, I need some history on this. I just went through this, as you're well aware, of another building, and John and I have seen this where, ooh, I need some history.
Sure.
And the library was able to provide that, but I'm sure a lot of it's in your database also.
Well, I have all the resource forms. In Kentucky, back in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of surveying that went on. A lot of the grants that we've gotten recently from the feds have been to redo a lot of these surveys. So we've got something like 400 surveys of all of the historic buildings in downtown that we could load up to that database. Some of them are really good, and then some of them aren't great. You know, some of them give you a lot of history and some of them don't, but they're not really accessible or searchable right now. And I think that would be if we can get that done, that would be a really handy thing. I think it'd be more in a database form. GIS is, people get so, you know, freaked out when you talk about GIS to just the general public. If they can put in like an address and search it, they're good. But you start looking at GPS coordinates and GIS, yeah.
Do it via address.
Sure, sure. We can do that.
That's something I can help with.
That's something Michaela can help with.
The wonderful partnership.
I just didn't want to slam her with that right off the bat.
I'd like to reinforce what Tom was saying. Joni told me, go to our website to find out about us when I was making the application. It's scary. You bring it up, says, this is who we are. Now, here's the application, and then you read through the application, and say, oh my God, what am I into? And then if I want to find something out, I download the guidelines, which is 115 pages. And then who we are about us, Joni's the only person that's on that link. And I was thinking, man, this needs to be a little bit more friendly for
Sure.
somebody that comes into town. They've heard about historic districts or preservation, type it in, and it should be something that's welcoming, exciting, gets you involved and say, oh my gosh, here's all these resources that I can go to. Here's the phone numbers I could call. Again, I'm an outsider. That's what I saw, and so I would just add another goal saying revise our website.
Okay.
It seems like the introduction needs to be like the purpose, our reason for being, what we're trying to achieve. And it might even help local residents understand why they have to fill out the lousy, you know?
Yeah.
Just need to soften up a little.
No, I understand. I understand. It is not the most attractive website in the world.
No, it's not just about the visual, but, I mean, if I'm looking to visit a community, I look at their government website.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's clear that, you know, some are really communicating with people. And that impresses me. And others are just like, well, country. You know, you can find us out if you have to.
Right, right.
And I just would like our image to be a little bit positive.
Let me talk with the IT folks and see what I can get worked out. We can certainly change, I would think maybe the look of it. And if we need to get more in the weeds with it, maybe we can look at a grant to work on that as well. Because, I mean, we don't have to just apply for one grant, guys. We can apply for a couple in a year.
Well, maybe it can fit under, there was one of the things that said that $5,000 gets allocated for communicating with the citizenry.
Sure.
I would think it might fall into that.
Yes, ma'am. And we can, if we want to do something of that nature, have an interactive database and a better website, those federal grants would be able to cover that. Now, I would have to rely on folks who know much more about computers than I do, because that's,
Hopefully the federal government has lots of money to spend. so-
they do, and they want to spend it on us, so we're going to get some of it.
Okay. Any other ideas for goals?
I got a question, sir.
Okay, John, you have a question? You've been so
No.
quiet.
The administrative cost, is that your salary, $17,000?
Yes, sir.
Do we need workman's compensation? You've got a question here, do we need workman's compensation?
Oh,
insurance?
that's just my notes to myself. We had to figure out if I needed workman's compensation because I was a part-time employee.
Aren't you on the city's insurance policy?
No, I'm just part-time. That was a question I had, because I'm part-time, do we need it to, and I think the answer was no to that.
That's the only question I had. Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah. I didn't think we had to. So that was just some notes I'd made to myself, John, as I was looking at that. That budget is just a very preliminary set of notes. I wanted to kind of let you all know what we're looking at with money.
Something personal. Do you get a big raise when you go to planning and zoning?
I sure hope so. I vote yes on that.
How about us? Did we get a raise?
Double knots.
Okay, great.
Yeah, pitch that right out there.
Wow.
Any other business before this board? I want to thank our new members and tell them we usually don't run quite this long. I think our record's about 7 minutes to get through some items, but new board, lots of once in
We had
every
some
12
administrative
years
stuff, yeah, we had to deal with.
activities.
Yeah.
So, welcome in, very much. Still a pleasure, it's still daylight, so we're okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Motion to adjourn, do I hear a second? Second. Have a second?